So you've got a repainted car, a really unhappy doctor, and a jury verdict so massive, so huge, that it actually went on to challenge the U.S. Constitution itself. Okay, let's get into the incredible story of how a simple paint job led to a landmark Supreme Court decision.
Let me ask you something. Imagine you've just dropped a ton of money on your absolute dream car. It's shiny, it's perfect, but what if you found out, months later, that the manufacturer had secretly repaired and repainted it before you ever even drove it off the lot? Well, that's exactly the question that kicks this whole crazy story off.
So let's meet our main character, Dr. Ira Gore. It's 1990, and he just bought a brand new, slick black BMW sports sedan. It looked absolutely perfect, and for 9 solid months, he drove it without a single issue. Everything seemed totally normal, but that's where the ordinary part of this story ends. Big time.
So how did this whole thing unravel? I mean, the car seemed perfect, right? Well, it all started with a simple trip to the detailer.
Dr. Gore decides to take his car to a detailer, hoping to make it look, and I'm quoting him here, snazzier than it normally would appear. And that's when the detailer spotted it. Something was off. The top, the hood, the trunk, they'd all been refinished. This brand new car, yeah, not so new after all.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. BMW actually admitted it, they confirmed the repaint, but, and this is a big but, they argued it was all part of their official nationwide policy. Basically, their rule was this: if damage to a new car cost less than 3% of the sticker price to fix, they didn't have to tell the buyer about it. And the damage to Dr. Gore's car, likely from acid rain during transport, cost just over $600 to fix. That's only 1.5% of the car's value. So from BMW's point of view, hey, no harm, no foul, they were just following their own rules.
Dr. Gore, of course, did not see it that way. He sued. And that brings us to 2 really important legal ideas you got to understand. First, you have compensatory damages. Think of that as making you whole money to cover the actual loss. But then you have punitive damages. Oh, that's different. That's punishment money. That's the we're going to make an example out of you money. Keep those 2 in your back pocket, because how they clash is what this whole case is about.
Dr. Gore felt like he'd been lied to, plain and simple, so he took BMW to court in Alabama. And what that jury decided to do, well, it sent shockwaves, and I mean shockwaves, through the entire legal and business world.
All right, first up, the actual harm. The jury had to figure out how much money Dr. Gore actually lost. An expert who used to be a BMW dealer came in and testified that a repainted BMW is worth about 10% less. Simple math. So the jury awarded Dr. Gore $4,000 in compensatory damages, to make him whole. Seems fair, right? Pretty straightforward.
But then came the punishment. On top of that $4 grand, the jury added $4 million in punitive damages. Suddenly, we are not talking about a little paint job anymore. We are talking about sending a massive, massive message to one of the biggest car companies on the planet.
So you're probably asking, where in the world did they get $4 million from? Well, here's how. Dr. Gore's lawyer pointed out that since 1983, BMW had sold almost 1,000 other cars that had been refinished and sold as new. So the jury did some quick math. They took the $4,000 of harm done to Dr. Gore, and they multiplied it by those 1,000 other cars. See what they did? They weren't just punishing BMW for this one car in Alabama. They were trying to punish them for their entire nationwide policy.
Naturally, BMW appealed, and the Alabama Supreme Court actually sided with them on one really big point. They said, hold on, an Alabama jury can't punish a company for stuff that happened in other states. I mean, for all they knew, that policy was perfectly legal somewhere else. So they ruled the verdict was flawed and slashed the award in half, down to $2 million. Still a ton of money.
But for BMW, even $2 million was way too much. So they appealed again, and this time they took it all the way to the top, the U.S. Supreme Court. Their argument was that this wasn't just about the money anymore. Nope, this was about a fundamental right under the Constitution.
And that's how we get to the giant legal question at the heart of this. The 14th Amendment guarantees something called due process of law. Basically, it protects people, and yeah, corporations count as people here, from being punished unfairly or arbitrarily. So the question for the Supreme Court was this: at what point does a penalty get so huge, so out of whack with the actual harm, that it stops being fair punishment and becomes, well, unconstitutional?
The Supreme Court decided to hear the case for that exact reason. They realized they needed to set some kind of standard, a framework to help judges everywhere figure out when a punitive award crosses that constitutional line and becomes, in their words, grossly excessive.
And that's just what they did. In their big 1996 decision, the court created a brand new test for looking at these kinds of damages. They laid out 3 key guideposts that courts all over the country now have to follow.
And here they are, the 3 big guideposts. Number 1, how bad was the defendant's behavior really? They call it reprehensibility. Number 2, what's the ratio between the punishment and the actual harm done? And number 3, how does this penalty stack up against fines for similar screw-ups? So let's break down how the court used these 3 on BMW.
Okay, Guidepost 1, reprehensibility. The court called this one perhaps the most important factor. But when they looked at what BMW did, they basically said, meh, it's not that bad. The harm was just economic, the car still ran fine, it was perfectly safe, BMW didn't lie to anyone's face or endanger anyone's health. So yeah, what they did wasn't great, but it wasn't exactly egregiously improper conduct.
Next up, the ratio. This is just simple math. You've got a $2 million punishment for $4,000 in actual harm. That works out to a 500 to 1 ratio. 500 to 1. Now, the court was careful not to draw a bright line, like anything over 10 to 1 is bad, but they did call this specific ratio breathtaking. And that was a huge red flag that something was seriously off.
And finally, Guidepost 3, comparable sanctions. The court looked around and asked, what's the normal fine for this kind of thing? And the difference was just wild. The maximum civil fine for something like this in Alabama was just $2,000. In other states, maybe $5,000 or $10,000. The court said there was no way BMW could have known that their policy, which might get them a tiny fine, could suddenly lead to a multi-million-dollar penalty. There was no fair notice.
So after running through those 3 new guideposts, low reprehensibility, that breathtaking ratio, and the huge difference between this penalty and other fines, the Supreme Court was ready to make its call.
The court's ruling was clear. That $2 million award wasn't just high, it was grossly excessive. So excessive that it actually violated BMW's constitutional right to due process. They threw out the Alabama court's decision and sent the case back down to be reconsidered, but this time using their new constitutional roadmap.
But, it wasn't a slam dunk. The decision wasn't unanimous. Justice Scalia wrote a really powerful dissent. He basically argued, who are we, the federal courts, to tell a state jury what its sense of outrage should be? He called the court's new framework an unjustified incursion into the rights of state governments, worrying that they were stepping on states' toes.
And that really leaves us with a big question today, the lasting legacy of this whole case. The 3 guideposts from BMW v. Gore are now the law. They're used all the time to slash these massive punitive damage awards, protecting businesses from what they call runaway juries. But here's the thing to think about. In creating that protection, did the court go too far? Did they make it harder for the little guy, for ordinary people, to truly hold giant corporations accountable when they mess up?